I fixed a small health issue and uncovered a much bigger lie. I was staring at the little orange pill bottle when my doctor walked back into the exam room with a face I'd never seen him make before. Not concerned, not sympathetic, confused and angry, like someone had just told him his medical license was printed on toilet paper. Dr. Garrison had been my physician for 8 years, had seen me through a broken collarbone, 2 bouts of bronchitis, and the aftermath of my father's death. I'd never seen him look at me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. He sat down without the usual small talk, set my file on the desk between us, and asked me a question that made my stomach drop into my shoes. "David, who has access to your food at home?" The question didn't make sense. I'd come in because I couldn't shake what I thought was burnout. For 3 months, I'd been waking up with headaches that felt like someone was driving railroad spikes through my temples. My hands trembled when I tried to hold my coffee mug. I'd lost 15 pounds without trying, and my wife Natalie kept saying I looked gaunt, kept pushing protein shakes and her homemade chicken soup on me. I'd chalked it up to the merger at work, the stress of managing 2 teams instead of 1, the late nights and early mornings. Classic exhaustion. But when I started forgetting simple things, like where I'd parked my car or what day of the week it was, Natalie insisted I see Dr. Garrison. She'd made the appointment herself, driven me here on a Wednesday morning, kissed my cheek in the parking lot, and told me she'd pick me up in an hour. Now the doctor was asking me about my food, and something in his tone made the fluorescent lights seem too bright. "My wife," I said slowly. "Natalie. We live together. She does most of the cooking." Dr. Garrison nodded like I'd confirmed something terrible. He opened my file and turned it toward me, pointing at a row of numbers I didn't understand. "Your blood work came back this morning," he said. "I ran a comprehensive panel because your symptoms suggested either a thyroid issue or possibly early-onset neurological problems. What I found instead was a significant concentration of antifreeze metabolites in your system." The words hit me in waves. Antifreeze, metabolites, system. I knew what antifreeze was, obviously. The bright green stuff you put in cars to keep the engine from freezing or overheating. "I don't understand," I said, and my voice sounded small and distant. "How would that—" "Doctor." Garrison's expression hardened. "Ethylene glycol poisoning. Someone has been putting antifreeze in your food or drinks, David. Based on the levels in your blood and your symptoms, this has been happening regularly for at least 2 to 3 months. You're lucky to be alive. Another few weeks and we'd be talking about permanent kidney damage or worse." The exam room tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of the chair and tried to process what he was saying. Antifreeze. Poison. Someone. The word someone echoed in my head because Dr. Garrison wasn't saying accident or contamination. He was saying someone, which meant intention, which meant purpose, which meant— I thought about Natalie waiting in the parking lot, probably scrolling through her phone, maybe texting her sister about dinner plans for Friday. Natalie, who'd been my wife for 6 years, who taught 2nd grade and cried during commercials with dogs in them. Natalie, who made me soup. "This has to be a mistake," I said. "There's no way someone would—" But Dr. Garrison was already picking up his phone. "I'm legally obligated to report this," he said. "This is attempted murder, David. I need to call the police, and you need to get to a safe location immediately. Do not go home. Do not tell anyone where you're going. Do you understand?" I didn't understand. Nothing made sense. My hands were shaking worse than they had in weeks, and I realized with creeping horror that the shaking wasn't from stress. It was from poison. Someone had been poisoning me, and my body had been screaming about it for months, while I'd blamed spreadsheets and quarterly reports. I'd met Natalie 7 years ago at a friend's wedding. She'd been a bridesmaid, I'd been a groomsman, and we'd spent the entire reception talking at a corner table while everyone else danced. She was funny and smart, with this way of tilting her head when she listened that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. We dated for 8 months before I proposed, got married in a small ceremony at her parents' church, and settled into what I thought was a happy life. We bought a house in the suburbs with a decent backyard and 2-car garage. She taught elementary school and loved it, came home with stories about kids who couldn't tie their shoes but could recite entire dinosaur taxonomies. I worked in corporate finance, managing portfolios for a mid-sized firm. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We talked about having kids someday, maybe in a year or 2. We had date nights every other Friday. We were normal, except now a doctor was telling me that my normal life included someone systematically poisoning me, and the only person with consistent access to my food was my wife. Doctor. Garrison made 3 phone calls while I sat there trying to remember how to breathe. The first was to the hospital's toxicology department, requesting immediate chelation therapy to help clear the poison from my system. The second was to the police department's non-emergency line, where he spoke in calm, clinical terms about a patient presenting with intentional poisoning. The third was to someone he called a patient advocate, asking for a social worker who specialized in domestic violence cases. Domestic violence. The phrase made me flinch. I wasn't being beaten or threatened. I was being poisoned, which somehow seemed less real, less immediate, even though Dr. Garrison had just told me I was lucky to be alive. Within 20 minutes, there were 2 police officers in the exam room, a man and a woman, both looking at me with expressions caught between sympathy and suspicion. The woman introduced herself as Officer Paulson, 15 years with the department. Her partner was Officer Chen. Wait, no, I need to avoid that name. Her partner was Officer Delgado. They asked me to tell them everything, starting from when my symptoms began. I told them about the headaches that started in late August, right after Labor Day, about the trembling hands and weight loss, about the memory problems and the exhaustion that felt like I was moving through wet concrete, about Natalie's concern, how she'd been taking such good care of me, making sure I ate even when I wasn't hungry, bringing me drinks when I worked late in the home office. Officer Paulson wrote everything down in a small notebook, her pen moving in quick, efficient strokes. Has your wife exhibited any unusual behavior lately? She asked. Any arguments? Financial problems? Changes in routine? I started to say no, that everything had been fine, but then I stopped. There had been small things I'd noticed but dismissed as coincidences or stress on her part too. 3 months ago, Natalie had suddenly become obsessed with life insurance, asking me multiple times if my policy through work was enough, if we should get supplemental coverage. I'd thought she was just being practical, planning for the future. She'd also started going to the gym more often, 4 or 5 times a week instead of her usual 2. And she'd gotten a new phone, saying her old one was glitching, but she'd become weirdly protective of it, taking it with her even when she went to the bathroom. She got a new phone, I said slowly, the pieces clicking together in a way that made me feel sick. About 3 months ago. She never leaves it out anymore. She used to just leave it on the counter, but now it's always in her pocket or her purse. Officer Delgado exchanged a look with his partner. Anything else? Different schedule? New friends? Spending more time away from home? I thought about it. Natalie had joined a book club 6 months ago, meeting every Monday night at someone's house. She'd seemed happier lately, more energetic, laughing more at her phone. I'd been glad she was making friends, building a social life outside of work and our marriage. Now I wondered what those Monday nights really were. She's been going to a book club, I said. Monday nights. She started going in March. Officer Paulson nodded and made another note. We're going to need you to come down to the station and make a formal statement, she said. We'll also need to send officers to your home to secure evidence. Is your wife there right now? I looked at my watch. It was almost 10:30 in the morning. She should be at work, I said. She teaches at Riverside Elementary, but she was supposed to pick me up here at 10. She's probably in the parking lot. Officer Delgado stood up. I'll go check, he said. Does she know you're getting blood work done? The question made my stomach lurch. She knows I had an appointment, I said. She made it for me. She drove me here. Another look passed between the officers, and I understood what they were thinking. If Natalie had been poisoning me, she'd want to know what the doctor found. She'd want to control the narrative, be there when I got the results, maybe to gauge whether I was getting suspicious or to spin whatever the doctor told me. By driving me here and planning to pick me up, she'd ensured she'd be present for whatever came next. Except Dr. Garrison had called the police instead of sending me home with antacids and a speech about stress management. Officer Delgado left the exam room, and I heard his radio crackle in the hallway. Officer Paulson pulled up a chair across from me. David, I know this is overwhelming, she said, but I need you to think carefully about the last few months. Has your wife done or said anything that seemed off, even in a small way? Any comments about money, about your health, about the future? I closed my eyes and tried to think past the pounding in my head, past the nausea rolling through my gut. Little moments came back to me, things I'd brushed off or forgotten. 2 weeks ago, Natalie had asked me what I wanted her to do if something happened to me, if I ended up in the hospital unable to make decisions. She'd framed it as a practical conversation, saying we should have those discussions while we were young and healthy. I told her I trusted her judgment completely, that I'd want her to make medical decisions if I couldn't. She'd smiled and kissed my forehead and said she'd take care of everything. Last month, she'd suggested I update my will, saying it was outdated since we'd gotten married. I'd put it off, too busy with work, and she'd seemed irritated about it, bringing it up 3 or 4 times before dropping the subject. And there were the drinks. God, the drinks. Natalie had started making me these protein smoothies every morning, blending fruit and yogurt and protein powder, insisting they'd help with my energy. I'd drunk them dutifully, grateful she was taking care of me. The smoothies were thick and sweet, strong enough to mask any taste. My hands started shaking again, but this time it wasn't the poison. It was rage and terror and disbelief all crashing together. She made me smoothies, I said, and my voice cracked. Every morning for the past 3 months. She'd bring them to me before work, watch me drink them. She made soup when I started losing weight, brought me coffee when I worked late. I looked at Officer Paulson, and I could see she understood. Every act of care, every gesture of love, had potentially been a delivery system for poison. We'll need samples of anything she's given you recently, Officer Paulson said. The smoothies, the soup, any beverages. Are they still at your house? I nodded. There's a container of soup in the fridge. She made a big batch on Sunday, and the protein powder is in the kitchen cabinet. Officer Paulson made another note. We'll get a warrant for your house and secure everything as evidence. In the meantime, you need to stay somewhere safe. Do you have family nearby? Friends who can take you in? I thought about my brother, Michael, who lived 30 minutes away with his wife and 2 kids. We weren't particularly close, talked maybe once a month, but he'd help if I asked. My brother, I said. I can call him. Officer Paulson nodded. Don't tell him details over the phone. Just ask if you can stay with him for a few days. We'll explain everything when we interview him. Officer Delgado came back into the exam room looking grim. Vehicle matching the wife's description is still in the parking lot, he said. Silver Toyota Camry, license plate ending in 349? I nodded. That was Natalie's car. She's sitting in the driver's seat on her phone. We've got a unit watching from a distance. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Natalie was out there right now, maybe texting someone, maybe wondering why my appointment was taking so long, maybe planning what to say when I came out, what story to tell about my test results. Officer Paulson stood up. We're going to bring her in for questioning, she said. We have enough probable cause based on the blood work and the doctor's report. But David, I need to be clear with you about something. This investigation is going to get very invasive very quickly. We'll be searching your home, your finances, your wife's phone records, everything. Your life is about to become public in ways you can't imagine. Are you prepared for that? I wasn't prepared for any of this. This morning I'd woken up thinking I had a stress problem. Now I was being told my wife had tried to kill me. But I nodded anyway because what else could I do? I just want to understand why, I said. Doctor. Garrison had been quiet during the police interview, but now he spoke up. David, I'm admitting you to the hospital for chelation therapy. It's a treatment that will help remove the ethylene glycol from your system, but it takes time. You'll need to stay at least 3 to 5 days, possibly longer depending on how your kidneys respond. The good news is that we caught this before permanent damage occurred, but you're not out of danger yet. The idea of staying in a hospital for days felt surreal, but also like a relief. A place where nobody could poison my food, where everything was monitored and controlled. Okay, I said. Whatever I need to do. Officer Paulson handed me a card with her direct number. We'll be in touch later today after we've brought your wife in and secured your home. Don't speak to anyone about this case except your lawyer and us. Don't post on social media, don't tell friends, don't answer calls from numbers you don't recognize. The media will get hold of this eventually, and you need to be prepared for that. A lawyer. I needed a lawyer. The thought made everything feel even more real, more terrifying. I'd never needed a lawyer for anything except closing on our house. Now I needed one because my wife had allegedly tried to murder me. They moved me to a private room on the 4th floor of the hospital within an hour. A nurse named Patricia hooked me up to an IV that would run chelating agents through my system for the next 12 hours, then switch to a different medication, then back again in cycles designed to bind with the poison and help my kidneys flush it out. She was kind and efficient, explaining everything she was doing in calm, professional terms. She didn't ask questions about why I was there, and I was grateful for that. I called Michael from the hospital room phone, using the excuse that I was having some health issues and needed a place to crash for a while after I was discharged. He agreed immediately, said I could stay as long as I needed, asked if I needed him to bring me anything. I told him the police would explain everything soon and to please just trust me. He sounded confused but didn't push. An hour later, Officer Paulson called my room. We've taken your wife into custody, she said. She's being questioned now. We've also executed a search warrant on your home and removed multiple items for testing, including the soup in your refrigerator, the protein powder, several beverages, and your wife's laptop and phone. We found some things you should know about. My chest tightened. What things? There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear papers shuffling. Your wife's phone contained extensive text message conversations with a man named Gregory Ashford. The messages are sexual in nature and suggest an ongoing affair dating back approximately 8 months. There are also messages discussing your life insurance policy and what she refers to as the plan. We're bringing Mr. Ashford in for questioning as well. The hospital room seemed to tilt. An affair. 8 months. While I'd been working late and trusting her completely, she'd been sleeping with someone else and plotting my death. Who is he? I asked, and I barely recognized my own voice. We're still gathering information, but according to his driver's license, Gregory Ashford is a personal trainer at the gym your wife has been attending. He's 32 years old, no criminal record. We'll know more after we interview him. The gym. All those extra sessions, the new focus on fitness, the happiness I'd attributed to endorphins and friendship. She'd been screwing her trainer and planning how to cash in on my death. How much is my life insurance worth? I asked. Officer Paulson hesitated. According to the policy documents we found in your home office, you have a $500,000 policy through your employer. There's also a supplemental policy your wife took out 3 months ago, without your knowledge, for an additional $250,000. We're investigating how she was able to do that, but it appears she forged your signature on the application. $750,000. That's what my life was worth to her. $750,000 and a fresh start with her trainer boyfriend. I thought about all the times she'd asked about life insurance, pushed me to update my will, asked about my beneficiaries. She hadn't been planning for our future together. She'd been planning for her future without me. The text messages, I said. What did they say about the plan? Another pause. I can't share specific evidence while the investigation is ongoing, but I can tell you that the messages contain discussions about your symptoms, speculation about how long it would take for the poisoning to be fatal, and debate about whether they should increase the dosage. There are also messages about what your wife planned to do with the insurance money, including buying a house together and traveling to Europe. David, this was premeditated and systematic. We have everything we need to charge her with attempted murder. I should have felt something, anger or betrayal or grief. Instead, I just felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left an empty shell. What happens now? I asked. Officer Paulson's voice softened slightly. Now we build the case. We'll test everything we removed from your house to confirm the presence of ethylene glycol. We'll analyze the text messages and any other digital evidence. We'll interview the boyfriend, your wife's friends and family, co-workers, anyone who might have information. Your wife will be arraigned within 48 hours, and given the severity of the charges and the evidence we have, I expect the judge will deny bail. She's not going anywhere, David. You're safe. Safe. The word felt foreign. I'd been living with someone who wanted me dead for 3 months, drinking poison she handed me with a smile, trusting her completely while she counted down to my funeral. I didn't know if I'd ever feel safe again. There's something else, Officer Paulson said. When we searched your home, we found a journal hidden in your wife's closet. It's essentially a diary documenting the poisoning, including dates, dosages, and your observable symptoms. She was keeping records. A journal. She'd documented my murder like a science experiment, noting when I vomited or got headaches or forgot where I'd put my keys. The clinical detachment of it made my skin crawl. Why would she write that down? I asked. People document crimes for different reasons, Officer Paulson said. Sometimes it's an insurance policy, proof that someone else was involved if things go wrong. Sometimes it's compulsion, a need to record what they're doing. Sometimes it's just arrogance, the belief that they'll never be caught. Whatever her reason, that journal is going to put her in prison for a very long time. I spent that first night in the hospital staring at the ceiling, watching the IV drip poison out of my system, one slow drop at a time. Nurse Patricia checked on me every few hours, monitoring my vitals, adjusting medication, asking gentle questions about my pain levels and nausea. The chelation therapy made me feel worse before it made me feel better, like having the flu and food poisoning simultaneously. I threw up twice, my whole body shaking with the effort. But Patricia said it was normal, that purging the poison was brutal, but necessary. Around midnight, my brother Michael showed up despite visiting hours being over. Apparently he'd called the hospital demanding to know what was happening, and someone had finally told him enough that he'd driven over immediately. A nurse led him into my room, and he stood at the foot of my bed looking like someone had punched him in the stomach. "Jesus Christ, David," he said. "The police called me. They told me Natalie tried to kill you. They said she'd been poisoning your food. How is that even possible?" I'd been asking myself the same question for 12 hours. "I don't know," I said. I trusted her completely. I never saw it coming. Michael pulled up a chair and sat down hard, running his hands through his hair. "I never liked her," he said quietly. "I know I never said anything, but she always seemed off to me. Too perfect, you know? Too eager to please. Rachel felt the same way. Rachel was his wife. I'd always thought they were just being overprotective, judging Natalie because she wasn't part of their social circle. "Why didn't you say something?" I asked, and I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. Michael met my eyes. "Because you loved her. Because you seemed happy. Because what was I going to say? Hey, your wife seems too nice. Maybe she's secretly evil? You would have thought I was crazy. Hell, I thought I was just being paranoid." He had a point. If Michael had pulled me aside 2 months ago and suggested Natalie was dangerous, I would have laughed him off. Love made you blind and stupid and trusting. It made you drink poison and call it care. "The police said she was having an affair," I said, "with her personal trainer. They said she was planning to kill me for the life insurance money." Michael's jaw clenched. "I hope they lock her up forever," he said, and there was real venom in his voice. "I hope she rots in a cell thinking about what she did." We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the beeping of my heart monitor and the drip of the IV. Finally, Michael asked, "What do you need from me?" I thought about it. What did I need? A place to stay when I got out of the hospital. Someone to help me sort through the wreckage of my life. A witness to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. "Just be there," I said. "I can't go back to that house. I can't sleep in that bed knowing what she did. I need somewhere safe until I figure out what comes next." Michael nodded. "You'll stay with us as long as you need. The guest room is yours. Rachel's already setting it up." The next morning, Detective Sergeant Lisa Thornton showed up at my hospital room with a briefcase full of evidence and a recorder to take my formal statement. She was in her mid-40s, with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that looked like they'd seen every variation of human cruelty. She introduced herself as the lead investigator on my case, 22 years with the department, specialized in domestic violence and attempted homicide. She sat down across from me and laid out her briefcase's contents with meticulous care. Photocopies of text messages, printouts of financial records, photographs of the items seized from my house. "I need to walk you through everything we've found," she said. "Some of this is going to be difficult to hear, but you need to know the full scope of what your wife and her accomplice were planning." Accomplice. The word made Gregory Ashford more than just an affair partner. It made him part of the murder plot. Detective Thornton opened a folder and pulled out a stack of printed text messages. "These are conversations between your wife Natalie and Gregory Ashford spanning the last 8 months," she said. "I'm going to read you selected excerpts, and I need you to tell me if anything stands out or connects to events you remember." She began reading, and each message was like a knife twisting in my chest. The messages started innocuous enough, flirty texts about workout sessions and playful innuendo. But around June, the tone shifted. Natalie had texted Gregory, "I can't do this anymore. I feel trapped. I wish I could just start over with you, but divorce would ruin me financially." Gregory's response, "Then don't get divorced. There are other ways." The next message from Natalie, sent 3 days later. "I've been thinking about what you said, about other ways. How would that even work?" They'd danced around the subject for another week before Gregory sent her a link to an article about ethylene glycol poisoning, noting that it was hard to detect and symptoms mimicked other illnesses. Natalie had responded with a simple, "Interesting." That one word, that clinical, detached, interesting, made me want to throw up again. Detective Thornton continued reading. Messages about dosage calculations, about how much antifreeze would be needed to cause symptoms without immediate death, about the importance of consistency. They'd researched it like a homework assignment, debating methods and timelines. In late July, Natalie had written, "I started today. Put it in his morning smoothie. He didn't notice anything." Gregory, "How much?" Natalie, 2 tablespoons. I'll increase it gradually." They'd documented my decline like scientists observing lab rats. August 5th. "He's having headaches now. Says they're from work stress. Doubled the dose." August 19th. "He threw up this morning. Getting worried he might go to the doctor, but he said he just needs rest." September 2nd. "He's lost 10 pounds. Looks terrible. Perfect." If you are enjoying this story already, please subscribe to see more stories like this. Detective Thornton set down the messages and looked at me with something that might have been pity. "There are over 300 messages like this," she said. "A complete chronicle of the poisoning. They also discussed what to do with your body after you died, how to act appropriately grief-stricken, and how soon they could move in together without raising suspicion." I felt detached from my own body, like I was watching this happen to someone else. "Did anyone else know?" I asked. "Any of her friends? Her family?" Detective Thornton shook her head. "We've interviewed her colleagues at the school and her family. Everyone is shocked. They all described her as caring and devoted. She maintained her mask perfectly." She pulled out another document, this one a photocopy of handwritten pages. "This is the journal we found in her closet. It's incredibly detailed. She recorded every dose, every symptom, every doctor's visit you mentioned. There are even notes about adjusting her approach based on your reactions." She turned to a page marked with a sticky note. "This entry is from 3 weeks ago. He's getting suspicious about how tired he is. Need to be more careful. Suggested he see Dr. Garrison for blood work, but told him to ask for a thyroid panel specifically. Should keep the doctor from looking for anything unusual. She was trying to control your medical care to prevent detection." My hands clenched into fists. She made the appointment with Dr. Garrison. She told him I was stressed and exhausted. She probably thought he'd prescribe anxiety medication and send me home. That's exactly what she thought. Detective Thornton confirmed. "We spoke with Dr. Garrison. He said your wife called his office and gave the receptionist a very specific list of symptoms that pointed towards stress and exhaustion. But Dr. Garrison has known you for years and decided to run comprehensive blood work anyway, which is what saved your life." I thought about Dr. Garrison's confused, angry face when he'd walked into that exam room with my test results. He'd known something was wrong, had trusted his instincts, even when everything pointed toward a simple diagnosis. "When can I thank him?" I asked. "He's visiting patients on the 3rd floor this afternoon. I'm sure he'd appreciate hearing from you." Detective Thornton gathered her papers back into organized piles. "David, I need to prepare you for what's coming. This case is going to trial, and it's going to be public. The media has already picked up on it. A teacher and a personal trainer plotting to murder her husband for insurance money is the kind of story that generates headlines. You're going to be scrutinized, your marriage will be dissected, people will have opinions about what you should have seen or done differently. It's going to be brutal." I'd been expecting this, but hearing it stated so bluntly still made my stomach churn. "What about my job?" I asked. "Have they been notified?" Detective Thornton nodded. "We contacted your HR department yesterday to explain the situation. They've been cooperative and understanding. You're on medical leave for the duration of your recovery and the investigation. Your position is protected." Small mercies. At least I wouldn't have to explain to my colleagues why I was suddenly in the hospital and my wife was in jail. "We've also frozen all joint accounts and assets pending the investigation," Detective Thornton continued. "Your wife won't have access to any money. You'll need to work with your lawyer to separate your finances and file for divorce. I can recommend some attorneys who specialize in cases like this. Cases like this. As if there were enough of them to constitute a category. "I don't even know where to start," I said. Detective Thornton's expression softened slightly. "One step at a time. Right now, focus on getting healthy. Let us handle the investigation. Your lawyer will handle the legal side. Your brother is providing a safe place to stay. You have support, David. You're not alone in this. But I felt alone. Profoundly, utterly alone in a way I'd never experienced before. The person I'd trusted most in the world had betrayed me in the most intimate, terrible way possible. How was I supposed to trust anyone again after that? Detective Thornton left me with a card for a victim services counselor and a thick folder of photocopied evidence I could review when I felt up to it. I wasn't sure I'd ever feel up to reading the details of my own attempted murder, but I kept the folder anyway. Nurse Patricia came in shortly after with medication and a gentle smile, and I asked her how long before the chelation therapy would finish. Another 3 days at minimum, she said. Your kidney function is improving, which is excellent news, but we want to make sure we've eliminated all traces of the toxin before we discharge you. 3 more days in this hospital bed, 3 more days of feeling like garbage as the treatment worked, but 3 days to heal, to process, to start figuring out what my life looked like now. That afternoon, Dr. Garrison stopped by during his rounds. He pulled up a chair and sat down with the weary posture of someone who'd been on his feet for 10 hours straight. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like someone tried to kill me," I said, and the absurdity of the statement made me laugh, a short, bitter sound that hurt my chest. "Doctor." Garrison didn't laugh. "I'm sorry I didn't catch this sooner," he said. "You came in 2 months ago complaining about headaches. I should have run more extensive tests then." I shook my head. "You had no reason to think someone was poisoning me." "I didn't think someone was poisoning me. You saved my life by trusting your instincts and running that blood work." "Thank you." Dr. Garrison accepted the gratitude with a slight nod. "The police have asked for all your medical records going back 2 years. I've provided them, along with my professional opinion about the timeline and effects of the poisoning. You should know that if your wife hadn't brought you in when she did, you probably would have died within 2 to 3 weeks. Your kidney function was already compromised, much longer, and the damage would have been irreversible." The timeline clicked into place. Natalie had made that appointment, had driven me here, had been planning to pick me up. She'd probably expected Dr. Garrison to tell me I was stressed and needed rest, maybe prescribe something for anxiety. Instead, he'd found poison and called the police. She must have been sitting in that parking lot wondering why I was taking so long, maybe texting Gregory to say something had gone wrong. "Do you know what happened after the police took her in?" I asked. "Did she confess?" Dr. Garrison shook his head. "I don't have details about the arrest, but Detective Thornton mentioned your wife lawyered up immediately and isn't talking. The evidence speaks for itself, though. The text messages, the journal, the insurance policies. She doesn't need to confess." I spent the rest of the week in the hospital, getting stronger as the poison left my system. Michael visited every day, bringing me books and magazines and updates about the outside world I wasn't ready to face yet. Rachel came too, bringing homemade cookies that I couldn't eat because my stomach was still too sensitive, but I appreciated the gesture. My nephew and niece made me a get well card covered in crayon drawings of superheroes, which made me cry in a way nothing else had. On Thursday, Detective Thornton called with an update. Gregory Ashford had been arrested and charged as an accomplice to attempted murder. He'd initially denied everything, claimed he and Natalie were just friends, but when confronted with the text messages, he'd broken down and confessed to the whole plot. He claimed it had been Natalie's idea, that she'd seduced him and manipulated him into helping her. He was cooperating with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence. "What does that mean for the case?" I asked. "It means we have 2 sources confirming the conspiracy," Detective Thornton said. "Ashford's testimony combined with the physical evidence and digital records creates an airtight case. Your wife's attorney knows this. They've already approached the prosecutor about a plea deal." A plea deal. Which meant Natalie might avoid trial, might negotiate a lighter sentence. The thought made me angry in a way I hadn't felt before, a white-hot rage that cleared away the numbness and hollow feeling. "I want her to go to trial," I said. "I want a jury to hear what she did." Detective Thornton's voice was carefully neutral. "That's your right as a victim. You can submit a victim impact statement opposing any plea deal. The final decision rests with the prosecutor, but your input matters. However, I should tell you that going to trial means months of proceedings, reliving the trauma repeatedly, testifying in detail about your marriage and the poisoning. It means Natalie's defense attorney will attack your credibility, try to make this about anything except what she did." Plea deals are often in the victim's best interest because they provide certainty and closure without the ordeal of a trial. I understood what she was saying, but the idea of Natalie getting a reduced sentence, of not having to face public accountability for what she'd done, felt like another betrayal. "Let me think about it," I said. I was discharged from the hospital on Saturday afternoon, 1 week after the doctor had asked me who had access to my food. Michael picked me up in his SUV, helped me gather the few belongings I'd accumulated during my stay. I'd lost another 5 pounds, looked gaunt and tired in the bathroom mirror. But I was alive, and my kidneys were functioning, and the poison was out of my system. Small victories. Michael drove me to his house in silence, letting me process. When we pulled into his driveway, Rachel came out to meet us with a hug that lasted longer than necessary. "Welcome home," she said, though it wasn't my home. I didn't have a home anymore. The house I'd shared with Natalie was a crime scene, and even after the police released it, I couldn't imagine living there again. The guest room Rachel had prepared was simple and clean. A queen bed with blue sheets, a dresser, a reading lamp. It looked like a hotel room, impersonal and temporary, which was exactly what I needed. I couldn't handle anything that reminded me of my old life right now. I spent the weekend sleeping and trying to eat small meals that my stomach would tolerate. Michael and Rachel gave me space but checked on me regularly, making sure I had everything I needed. Their kids, blessedly, were staying with Rachel's parents for a few days to give me peace. On Monday, I met with the attorney Detective Thornton had recommended, a woman named Catherine Reeves, who specialized in family law and victim advocacy. She had an office in downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and she sat across from me with a legal pad and kind eyes that had probably seen too many broken people. "Tell me what you need," she said, and I realized I didn't know. I needed my life back, but that wasn't possible. I needed to understand why Natalie had done this, but understanding wouldn't change anything. I needed justice, but I wasn't sure what that looked like. "I need to divorce her," I said finally. "I need to separate all our finances. I need to make sure she can't benefit from what she did in any way." Catherine nodded and took notes. "We'll file for divorce immediately on grounds of attempted murder. Given the circumstances, the court will grant it quickly. We'll also petition to have her removed as beneficiary on all your accounts and insurance policies. The forged supplemental policy will be voided due to fraud. You'll retain full ownership of the house and all joint assets. She won't see a penny." "What about the criminal trial?" I asked. Catherine set down her pen. "The prosecutor's office called me this morning. Natalie's attorney has proposed a plea deal, 15 to 20 years in exchange for pleading guilty to attempted murder and conspiracy. No trial, no testimony from you required. The prosecutor is inclined to accept because it guarantees a significant prison sentence without the risk of a jury trial. 15 to 20 years. It sounded like a lot until I did the math. Natalie was 31. She could be out in her mid-40s, still young enough to build a new life. The thought made me sick. "And if we go to trial?" I asked. "She's facing 25 years to life if convicted. But trials are unpredictable. Juries can be sympathetic. Defense attorneys can create reasonable doubt. There's a risk, however small, that she could be acquitted or convicted of a lesser charge." Catherine leaned forward. "David, I've seen a lot of these cases. The evidence against your wife is overwhelming. Her journal alone is damning. The text messages are devastating. Gregory Ashford's cooperation means she has no allies. Any competent jury will convict her. But the process will destroy you. Months of preparation, invasive questions, cross-examination designed to paint you as somehow complicit or negligent. The media circus will be relentless. Is that worth the possibility of a few extra years on her sentence?" I thought about everything Natalie had taken from me. My health, my sense of safety, my ability to trust. I thought about the methodical way she'd documented my suffering, the casual cruelty of perfect when describing my weight loss. I thought about her texting her lover while making me soup she'd poisoned. "I want her to feel what I felt," I said. "I want her to know what it's like to have everything taken away." Catherine's expression was gentle but firm. "Then accept the plea deal. 15 to 20 years in prison will accomplish that. She'll lose her career, her freedom, her relationship with Ashford, her reputation, everything, and you'll get to move forward without the trauma of a trial." She had a point. But there was still a part of me that wanted the public reckoning, wanted everyone to know exactly what Natalie had done, wanted her to have to sit in a courtroom and hear witnesses describe her crimes in detail. "Let me think about it," I said again. Catherine nodded. "Take your time, but the prosecutor needs an answer by the end of the week." I left her office feeling more confused than when I'd arrived. What did justice even look like in a situation like this? What punishment could possibly balance what she'd done? That night, I lay in Michael's guest room and read through the folder of evidence Detective Thornton had given me. The text messages were worse than I'd imagined, full of cruel observations and casual planning. "He's suspicious about the headaches. Need to be more careful. Maybe we should slow down, let him recover a bit so it doesn't seem sudden. Can't wait until this is over and we can be together." They'd treated my murder like an inconvenient but necessary step toward their happy ending. The journal was even worse, clinical and detailed and utterly devoid of emotion. Natalie had recorded everything like a scientist documenting an experiment. Dates, times, dosages, symptoms, observations about my behavior and health. There were notes about my work stress, about arguments we'd had, about moments of intimacy that now felt obscene, knowing what she was doing to me. One entry from September read, "D seems to be getting weaker. Good progress. Insurance paperwork processed. Everything on track." She'd reduced my life to a checklist, my death to a timeline. I wanted to hate her, wanted to feel pure, burning rage. But what I felt instead was grief, enormous and suffocating. Grief for the relationship I'd thought we had, for the person I'd believed her to be, for the future I'd imagined. All of it lies, all of it poisoned from the start. On Wednesday, the story broke publicly. Someone, maybe a clerk at the courthouse or a cop looking for extra money, leaked details to the press. By noon, my name and face were all over the news. "Local man survives wife's poison plot," screamed one headline. Teacher arrested for attempted murder of husband, read another. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, exploded with notifications. Texts from old friends, calls from reporters, messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, all wanting details or offering shallow sympathy. I turned it off again and handed it to Michael. Make it stop, I said, and he nodded, taking the phone away. The media attention was worse than I'd anticipated. News vans parked outside Michael's house. Reporters called his landline. Someone got hold of our wedding photos and plastered them across tabloid websites with captions speculating about what signs I'd missed. Armchair psychologists analyzed my relationship on talk shows. People who'd never met me had opinions about my intelligence, my judgment, my culpability, and my own poisoning. Rachel had to threaten legal action to keep reporters away from her kids' school. It was a nightmare, and it was only beginning. Detective Thornton called Thursday afternoon with more news. We've located the source of the antifreeze. Your wife purchased it from an auto parts store 3 months ago, paid cash. The store's security footage shows her making the purchase. We've also traced the forged life insurance application back to Gregory Ashford. He works part-time for an insurance broker and had access to the forms. He's admitted to helping her forge your signature. So they planned this together from the start, I said. It appears so. Ashford's cooperation has given us a complete picture of the conspiracy. They met at the gym in March, began an affair in April, and started planning your murder in May. The timeline is well documented in their communications. 5 months. She'd spent 5 months planning how to kill me while sleeping in our bed, eating meals I'd paid for, accepting my affection and trust. The scope of the deception was staggering. I've decided about the plea deal, I said. I want to refuse it. I want this to go to trial. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Are you sure? Once we reject the plea, the prosecutor moves forward with the full case. There's no going back. I thought about Catherine's warnings, about the media circus, and the invasive questions, and the possibility of failure. But I also thought about Natalie sitting in a cell, about her escaping the full weight of public judgment because of a backroom deal. I'm sure, I said. She documented everything she did to me in that journal. She texted her lover about my symptoms. She deserves to have all of it read aloud in a courtroom where everyone can hear what she is. I need the world to know the truth. Detective Thornton sighed softly. Okay, I'll inform the prosecutor. Trial will likely be scheduled for spring, probably April or May. That gives you time to prepare, but it also means months of this hanging over you. I knew, but I'd made my decision. The prosecutor, an assistant district attorney named Richard Kowalski, called me that evening. He was direct and professional, explained that he'd been prepared to recommend the plea deal to save me the trauma of testifying, but respected my decision to proceed to trial. I want you to understand what you're signing up for, he said. The defense will be aggressive. They'll try to paint you as controlling or abusive, suggest that your wife felt threatened or trapped. They'll question your timeline, your credibility, your motivations. They'll make you relive every moment of your marriage and the poisoning. It won't be pleasant. I'd already accepted this. I understand, but the evidence is solid, right? The journal, the texts, the medical records? Richard's voice was confident. The evidence is exceptional. One of the strongest cases I've seen. Your wife documented her own crime in exhaustive detail. Gregory Ashford is testifying against her. We have forensic evidence of ethylene glycol in the food products from your home. We have the forged insurance documents. We have her contradictory statements to police before she lawyered up. Barring jury nullification or extreme incompetence on my part, she will be convicted. That was what I needed to hear. Then let's do this. Richard outlined the timeline. Jury selection in April, trial estimated at 2 to 3 weeks, verdict by mid-May. He'd need me to meet with him regularly to prepare my testimony, review evidence, discuss strategy. He'd also arrange for a victim advocate to support me through the process. One more thing, Richard said. Gregory Ashford's plea deal includes testifying against your wife in exchange for a reduced sentence of 8 to 12 years. Are you comfortable with that? Was I comfortable with Natalie's lover getting half the time she'd face? No, but I understood the necessity. He's cooperating fully? I asked. Completely. He's provided details about their relationship, the planning, his role in the insurance fraud. His testimony will be crucial in establishing premeditation and conspiracy. Then I could live with it. Okay. Over the next few months, my life fell into a strange new routine. I lived in Michael's guest room, worked remotely from my laptop when I had the energy, met regularly with Catherine about the divorce, and with Richard about the trial. I started seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Angela Foster, who specialized in trauma and betrayal. She helped me process what had happened, work through the complicated emotions of loving someone who'd tried to kill me, and develop strategies for managing the anxiety and paranoia that had taken root in my mind. I couldn't eat food anyone else prepared without checking the containers. I couldn't accept drinks without watching them being made. I woke up from nightmares where Natalie stood over me with a bottle of antifreeze, smiling. Dr. Foster said it was normal, that trauma rewired your brain, that healing would take time. Time. I had plenty of that now. My job had granted me extended medical leave, my friends and remaining family knew to give me space. I existed in a limbo between my old life and whatever came next. waiting for the trial that would hopefully provide closure. In December, 3 months after my hospitalization, the divorce was finalized. Catherine had expedited it through the courts, given the extraordinary circumstances. I retained the house, all joint assets, and full control of my finances. Natalie retained nothing, not even the wedding ring she'd worn while planning my murder. I should have felt relief or satisfaction, but mostly, I just felt empty. The legal dissolution of our marriage was a formality. The real ending had happened in Dr. Garrison's exam room when I'd learned the truth. In January, I finally went back to the house. I'd been avoiding it, couldn't face the place where I'd been poisoned, where Natalie had ground antifreeze into my morning smoothies and watched me drink them. But I needed to sort through my belongings, decide what to keep and what to sell with the house. Michael came with me for moral support. Walking through the front door felt surreal, like visiting a museum of my former life. Everything looked the same, the furniture we'd picked out together, the photos on the walls, the kitchen where she'd prepared my meals. But it all felt contaminated now, tainted by knowledge of what had happened here. I found the blender she'd used for the smoothies and threw it in the garbage, found the soup pot and did the same, found our wedding album and sat on the couch staring at pictures of us smiling, young and hopeful and ignorant of what was coming. Michael sat beside me quietly. "What do you want to do with this stuff?" he asked. "Burn it," I said. "Burn all of it." But I didn't. Instead, I packed up the things I wanted to keep, mostly books and clothes and a few pieces of furniture. I donated the rest to charity. The house went on the market in February and sold within 3 weeks to a young couple who didn't know its history and didn't ask. I signed the papers and took the money and tried not to think about the life I'd built in that space, the future I'd imagined that had died with my trust. The trial began on April 18th, a Monday morning at the county courthouse. I'd prepared as much as I could, met with Richard dozens of times, reviewed my testimony until I could recite it in my sleep. But nothing prepared me for walking into that courtroom and seeing Natalie for the first time since her arrest. She sat at the defense table in a conservative gray suit, her hair pulled back, looking small and fragile, and nothing like the woman who'd methodically poisoned me. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I searched her face for some sign of remorse or recognition or emotion. I found nothing. She looked away first, whispering something to her attorney. The jury selection took 2 days. Richard was meticulous, eliminating anyone who showed bias against women or seemed too sympathetic to defendants. The final jury was 8 women and 4 men, ranging in age from mid-20s to late 60s, a cross-section of ordinary people who would decide Natalie's fate. Opening statements happened on Wednesday. Richard stood before the jury and laid out the prosecution's case with devastating clarity. The defendant, Natalie Thompson, systematically poisoned her husband David Thompson for 3 months with antifreeze, a substance known to cause agonizing symptoms and eventual death. She did this not in a moment of passion or fear, but as part of a calculated plan to murder him and collect $750,000 in life insurance money. She documented her crime in a personal journal. She discussed it in text messages with her lover and accomplice, Gregory Ashford. She forged David's signature on insurance documents to increase the payout. She watched her husband suffer, recorded his symptoms, and adjusted her dosages to maximize the effect. This is not a case of an unhappy marriage or a desperate woman. This is premeditated, cold-blooded attempted murder, and the evidence will prove it beyond any reasonable doubt. The defense attorney, a man named Thomas Brennan, took a different approach. Natalie Thompson made mistakes, he admitted. She had an affair. She talked about leaving her marriage in ways that were inappropriate and hurtful. But talking about something and doing it are not the same thing. The prosecution wants you to believe that a mild-mannered elementary school teacher somehow became a master poisoner, but their evidence is circumstantial at best. Text messages taken out of context. A journal that could be fiction or fantasy. An embittered husband and a jilted lover, both with reasons to lie. Ladies and gentlemen, you will hear a different story in this courtroom. A story of a troubled marriage, misunderstandings, and a rush to judgment. I listened to Brennan paint Natalie as the victim, and rage flooded through me so intensely I had to grip the edge of the bench to keep from standing up and shouting. Michael, sitting beside me, put a hand on my shoulder. "Breathe," he whispered. "Let the evidence speak." The prosecution called its witnesses methodically over the next week. Dr. Garrison testified about finding ethylene glycol in my blood, described the symptoms and timeline, explained how antifreeze poisoning worked. The jury listened intently, several taking notes. The toxicology expert confirmed the presence of poison, showed charts and graphs demonstrating the levels in my system and what they meant. A pharmacologist explained how ethylene glycol metabolizes, the damage it causes, the fact that early intervention had saved my life. Detective Thornton walked the jury through the investigation, the text messages, the journal, the physical evidence. She read excerpts from Natalie's journal, her voice flat and professional as she recited entries like, "Increased dose today, he's showing more symptoms," and "Perfect progress, should be effective within another month." Several jurors looked sick. One older woman kept shaking her head, her expression horrified. The forensic analyst testified about testing the protein powder and soup from my house, confirming both contained ethylene glycol. She showed photographs of the containers, explained her methodology, stated her findings with scientific certainty. The insurance investigator explained the forged policy, showed the fake signature, detailed how Gregory Ashford had facilitated the fraud. Then Gregory Ashford himself took the stand. He looked terrible, thin and pale in an orange jumpsuit, his hands shaking as he was sworn in. Richard walked him through his relationship with Natalie, the affair, the discussions about me, his role in the insurance fraud. "When did you first realize Natalie was poisoning her husband?" Richard asked. Gregory's voice was barely audible. "She told me in July. We were at her house while David was at work. She said she'd started putting antifreeze in his food, that it would look like natural causes, that we could be together after he died. I should have stopped her. I should have gone to the police. Instead, I helped her forge the insurance documents and kept quiet. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Thomas Brennan's cross-examination was brutal. "You were having an affair with the defendant, correct? And when that affair ended because she was arrested, you decided to save yourself by lying about her, didn't you?" Gregory shook his head. "I'm not lying. I have the text messages. She wrote everything down. I was there. I know what she did." Brennan pressed harder. "You're getting a reduced sentence in exchange for this testimony. 8 to 12 years instead of 25 to life. That's quite a motivation to say whatever the prosecution wants, isn't it?" Gregory met his eyes. "I'm testifying because it's the truth. I helped her try to kill David. I'm guilty, and so is she. No plea deal changes that." The jury seemed unmoved by Brennan's attacks. The evidence was too strong, too documented, too overwhelming. Finally, on the 8th day of trial, I was called to testify. Walking to the witness stand felt like moving through water, everything slow and surreal. I was sworn in, stated my name, and sat down facing the jury while Richard approached. "Mr. Thompson, can you tell the jury about your marriage to the defendant?" he asked. I'd rehearsed this, knew exactly what to say, but actually speaking the words out loud in front of strangers was harder than I'd anticipated. "I met Natalie 7 years ago. We dated, got married, bought a house together. I thought we were happy. I loved her. I trusted her completely." Richard nodded. "When did you first notice something was wrong with your health?" I described the symptoms, the timeline, my assumption that it was work stress. I described Natalie's care, the smoothies and soup, her encouragement to see Dr. Garrison. I watched the jury's faces as I explained how the person I loved most had used my trust to poison me systematically. Richard introduced exhibits, photographs of me before the poisoning and after, showing the dramatic weight loss, medical records detailing my symptoms, the protein powder container with traces of antifreeze. "How did you feel when you learned your wife had been poisoning you?" Richard asked. I looked at Natalie for the first time since taking the stand. She was staring at the table, her face blank. "Destroyed," I said quietly. "Betrayed in a way I didn't know was possible. She was the person I trusted most, and she was killing me. Every kind gesture was an attempt on my life. Every 'I love you' was a lie. I don't think I'll ever fully recover from that." Thomas Brennan's cross-examination tried to poke holes in my story, suggest I'd somehow deserved suspicion or was exaggerating my symptoms. "Isn't it true you were under significant work stress during this period?" he asked. "Yes, but that didn't cause antifreeze to appear in my blood." "Isn't it possible you're misremembering or conflating events because you're angry about your wife's affair?" "The medical records and text messages aren't my memories. They're facts. You've said you trusted your wife completely, yet you're now asking this jury to destroy her life. Isn't that revenge for her infidelity rather than attempted murder?" I leaned forward, making sure my voice was clear. If she'd just had an affair and left me, I would have been hurt. I would have gotten divorced and moved on. But she didn't do that. She poisoned me. She documented it. She planned my funeral while making my breakfast. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. Brennan tried for another hour, but he had nothing. My story was consistent because it was true. After I stepped down, the prosecution rested. The defense called character witnesses, Natalie's parents and sister who testified she'd always been kind and gentle, would never hurt anyone. They called colleagues from the elementary school who described her as dedicated and caring, but none of them could explain the journal or the text messages or the antifreeze in my food. Thomas Brennan didn't call Natalie to testify, probably because Richard would have eviscerated her on cross-examination. Closing arguments happened on a Friday. Richard summarized the evidence, reminded the jury of their duty, and ended with a powerful statement. Natalie Thompson poisoned her husband slowly and deliberately, documented every step, and only stopped because a vigilant doctor discovered what she was doing. She is guilty of attempted murder, and the evidence proves it beyond any shadow of doubt. Justice demands accountability. Thomas Brennan made a final plea for reasonable doubt, suggesting the circumstantial nature of some evidence, asking for mercy. But he looked defeated, and the jury looked unmoved. They deliberated for 6 hours. 6 hours of me sitting in the courthouse hallway with Michael and Rachel and Catherine, waiting for 12 strangers to decide whether my suffering mattered. When the bailiff finally called us back into the courtroom, my heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. The jury filed in, their faces serious. The forewoman stood. "On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find?" the judge asked. "Guilty." The word echoed through the courtroom. Natalie's shoulders slumped. Her mother sobbed audibly. I felt relief, vindication, grief, all of it at once. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder? Guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud? Guilty. 3 for 3. Natalie turned to look at me one final time, and I saw something that might have been regret or anger or fear in her eyes. I didn't care which. She'd made her choices, documented them carefully, and now she'd face the consequences. Sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. In the meantime, Gregory Ashford received his plea deal, 10 years in prison with possibility of parole after 8. Natalie's sentencing hearing was packed with media, victims' advocates, and curious onlookers. The judge allowed me to read a victim impact statement before pronouncing sentence. I'd written and rewritten it a dozen times, trying to capture the enormity of what had been taken from me. When I stood at the podium and looked at Natalie, I kept my voice steady and clear. You took my health, my sense of safety, my ability to trust. You documented my suffering like a science experiment. You planned my funeral while sleeping beside me. You robbed me of years of my life I'll spend in therapy trying to heal from what you did. But you didn't win. I survived. I exposed the truth. And now everyone knows exactly what you are. The judge sentenced Natalie to 28 years in prison, calling her crimes exceptionally cruel and premeditated. She'd be eligible for parole after 23 years, which meant she'd be in her mid-50s before she could apply. It wasn't life, but it was justice. As they led her out of the courtroom in handcuffs, I felt the weight I'd been carrying for 8 months finally begin to lift. I walked out of the courthouse into bright May sunshine, Michael and Rachel flanking me, reporters shouting questions I didn't answer. I'd given my statement in that courtroom, and that was enough. The media would move on to the next scandal eventually. My life would become my own again. It's been a year now since that Wednesday morning when Dr. Garrison asked me who had access to my food. I've moved to a new city, started a new job, slowly rebuilt my life from scratch. I still see Dr. Foster twice a month, still have nightmares occasionally, still check my food compulsively. Some scars don't fully heal, but I'm alive. I'm free. And I know the truth. Natalie is in prison where she belongs, Gregory Ashford is serving his time, and I survived what they tried to do to me. I fixed a small health issue and uncovered a much bigger lie. In the process, I learned that trust is earned, that love can be weaponized, and that sometimes the person who promises to care for you in sickness and in health is the one making you sick. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought, that good people still exist, and that justice, however delayed, does eventually arrive. That knowledge, hard-won and painful as it was, might be the most important thing I've ever learned. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.